Topic of today's is Indian fiction moving away from Indian reality? This is the question that the eminent panel of literators will now explore. I'd like to call upon the panelists one by one. I'll start off with Shri Govind Mishra. Shri Govind Mishra is an award-winning Indian novelist writing in India who has to his credit more than 53 books and has been awarded the most prestigious Hindi awards, namely Vyas Samman and Sahitya Akademi Award. He was also awarded the Bharat Bharati Samman for the year 2011, the highest literary award given to by anyone, by the Uttar Pradesh government. Welcome, sir. I'd also like to call upon now Srimati Nabaneeta Devsen. Srimati Nabaneeta Devsen is a major creative writer in India and an academic of international recognition. She has received national and international acclaim, including Padma Shri, Sahitya Akademi Award, Bangla Academy Lifetime Achievement Award, Publishers and Booksellers Guild Lifetime Achievement Award, etc. She has represented Indian writing at international fora, was the Radhakrishnan Memorial Lecturer at Oxford University, held at Maitag Chair of Comparative Literature and the Creative Writing at Colorado College, USA. A visiting professor at the International Summer School of Semiotic and Structural Studies, was a member of the executive committees of International Comparative Literature Association and of the International Association of Semiotic Studies. I'd also like to welcome Shri Ashoka Mitran. He's one of the most influential figures in post-independent Tamil literature. He began his literary career with the prize-winning play Anbin Parsu, followed by many short stories, novellas, and novels. A distinguished essayist and critic, he is the editor of the literary journalist Kanai Yazi. He has received several awards, including the Sahitya Akademi Award for his work Appavin Snigdhar, a collection of short stories, and the National Award instituted by the Bharatiya Bhasha Parishad. Welcome, sir. Moderating the discussion is Shri K. Satchidanandan, who has 23 collections of his poetry in 18 languages, including English, Irish, Arabic, French, German, and Italian. He has won 27 literary awards, including Knighthood of the Order of Merit from the Government of Italy and India-Poland Friendship Medal from the Government of Poland. A film on him, Summer Rain, was released in 2007. This panel is a presentation by the Central Sahitya Academy. I'd like to tell the panelists to please carry on with the discussion. Ladies and gentlemen, please enjoy the session. Thank you.
Fellow panelists and dear friends, let me at the very outset thank the Sahitya Academy for sponsoring this particular session, which has been titled Novel and the People, Is Indian Novel Moving Away from Indian Reality? The title, in fact, raises quite a few questions to which perhaps we don't have any very clear and lucid answer. The title, as perhaps some of you, especially the seniors among you, might remember, the title takes off from a work of criticism, Novel and the People, by Ralph Fox, which was quite popular in the 40s and the 50s, in fact, as a work of criticism, especially about the realist fiction, and it was a kind of Bible to the progressive writers of that period. This title has been given to the session mainly because this session is supposed to discuss the connections or disconnections between Indian reality and Indian fiction. And Indian reality obviously is a problematic term. Is there a unified Indian reality at all? Is not reality mediated by language, mediated by class and caste and religion and gender and whatnot? And we perceive reality in our own very different ways, our personal ways, which are also in some sense impacted by the kind of communities and the collectives to which we belong. And hence, perhaps it is not so wise to speak about a single and wholesome Indian reality. There are perhaps Indian realities, and often it is said that novel narrates the nation. And even then, if you look at our novels, you will find that there are many nations within the nation, and novels represent this multiple, many-dimensional reality of India. And secondly, the perspective of the writer also comes into play, apart from the community to which the writer belongs, because you may try to look at Indian life from a subaltern perspective, from below, from the point of view of a suffering woman, of a Dalit, of a tribal in Jharkhand, for example. And you may look at it also maybe from above, from the point of view of the upper middle class or the capitalist entrepreneur. So you have many ways of looking at reality. And all these, in some sense, are going to impact the way the novel looks at reality, looks at life, and narrates reality. Other than, of course, the questions of form, which a novel obviously brings in. So if you look at Indian fiction after independence, which is going to be our main theme, you'll find you look at a novel like Mahashwara Devi's Aranya Radhikar, which speaks about mainly about tribal life, or you have Phanishwarnath Renu's Maila Anchal, which speaks about rustic life, and you have a lot of Dalit novels or novels written about Dalits, beginning from Gopinath Mohanty's Paraja in Oriya and going to the Bama's novels, for example, in Tamil, like Sangadi, and you have Siddhalingayya and Devanuru Mahadeva and all those major Dalit writers in Kannada who have also tried to look at Indian reality from a Dalit point of view and try to find a new language and a new idiom to express their way of looking at life and their own experiences and the kind of conflicts they often had with the mainstream society. So there are many realities and there are many ways of looking at reality. There are many ways of constructing this reality in the form of fiction, novel or short story. And so today I think we'll be mainly discussing these multiple realities and the way these realities impact the Indian fiction. So ultimately it's going to be a kind of general discussion on post-independence fiction in India. But we have three practicing novelists here, because Nabaneeta has written fiction too. Of course, she's primarily, I would consider primarily a poet, but she has also written fiction and criticism. Govind Mishra here is a Hindi fiction writer primarily. And we have Ashoka Mitran, who is one of the veterans of Tamil fiction. So I would like them also to say something about their own work and how they approach reality, and then maybe make some comments on the fiction scene in India with special reference to their own languages. Now, Ananthamurthy unfortunately has not been able to make it. Of course, his presence would have really contributed to and enriched this discussion, but as many of you know, he is not quite well and he has not been able to come, and he has sent his blessings to and his best wishes to the session. Since Sri Ashoka Mitran has to leave a little early, I mean, he has to catch a flight. So this session, I have been advised by the organizers to divide this session into two. So first we will have a brief conversation with Ashoka Mitran, after which we will come into the discussion of the theme with the other two panelists here. So I would like you to say something about your own fiction, your own growing up as a fiction writer, and the way your fiction connects to the reality around you, the urban or the rural reality, the Tamil reality, or whatever you call it, or reality in general. How do you perceive Indian reality, of course, in its specific form as it appears in your fiction? And I know that your generation brought about also a major change in the way Tamil fiction used to be written, because you and Sundar Ramaswamy and quite a few others have changed the landscape of Tamil fiction entirely. Of course, Mauni and Pudumai Pittan, all of them started a kind of new way of looking at reality and expressing reality. So how would you look at your own work in relation to reality, whatever it is? Of course, it's a vague term, I know. Would you like to say something? Yeah. It's on. Just hold it close. Yeah.
Is it all right?
Yeah.
It's so kind of the organizers to invite me and make me talk to you. See, Mr. Ananthamurthy could excuse himself, but having come all the way here, I can't do that. And I'll try to justify these statements by the how less I'll be talking to you. First of all, when Indian novelists began to write, they didn't know who their audiences were. See, this is a very important thing. When you write to communicate to somebody. And again, that person should be able to read your work. In the beginning, none of the Indian novelists had any idea of who would be reading them. So the first novels, as a matter of fact, they were charting on unknown seas and again trying to find out some means of communicating with people. And it's only as late as 1930 or so, that is just about 80 years, that the writer has some idea as to whom he should communicate to. And for a number of years, until probably 1950, 1960, before the identities began to be sharpened, the novel used to be in a very general form. You see, it could be anybody. It could be a Nadar, it could be a Mudaliar, it could be anybody. So it was a very generalized fiction. But it's for the past 50, 60 years that novel becomes specific. And so when I write, much more than what I write, who my father is becomes important. And so they take the message not only from the written word, but also what he should be communicating or what he represents. And again, quite a number of these factors come into. As a matter of fact, some years ago, I was invited to a Minorities Commission seminar. And, I went there. But I asked the gentleman who was organizing it, why are you inviting me, a person like me? But he said, you are also a minority. And now, novel has become an expression of the minorities. So, the closer it is to his minority self, the more important it's considered. As a matter of fact, you see, Professor Satchidanandan wanted me to talk about my own novels. He said, I really do not know them. I too can't understand my novels, but I can understand other people's novels. And so, 2 years ago, a novel was published, and again it was given the Sahitya Akademi Award. And then there was a lot of hue and cry from that particular area. So the person had written a kind of a history of his community. And again, when he writes that history, all the heroes are from his community. The result, if you read the novel, and again, if you tend to go with the novel, that particular community has been ruling South India. And there was a lot of protests also, but he was given the award. And again, it was his first work. And he was only 42 years. So you could excuse him for his age. And again, the next year, another novel came out, but this did not get any award. As a matter of fact, some award should be given to that, because the novel is 1,000 pages. See, to read 1,000 pages, it requires a lot of effort. You need to hold it in your hand. Say, I can't hold a book which is 1,000 pages. And he writes for 1,000 pages, and all he writes is about his community, from about 100 years ago to the present day. But now, not to be undone by that gentleman, another person picks up his community, and now this novel is 2,000 pages. So this is the state of novel writing. I think it should be so in other places also, because in the previous session, each one was emphasizing his or her, the importance of her language. Not necessarily, there were dialects. So Tamil is a very old language, and it has so many divisions, and again, so this restricting to one's own community, that is happening now. Whether it is a good thing or a welcome thing, see, it's very difficult to say. But people want to assert that they are the most important people, and that should be emphasized to the rest of the world. And with this, I allow Professor Satchidanandan, a man for all seasons, to continue.
I would like also you to at least speak about one of your novels, say 18th Parallel, which is one of the most well-known of your works. I mean, how you came to write that, and how did you shape reality, and what exactly was the kind of change in form that you wanted to perhaps induce in the art of fiction by writing a novel like that?
Well, this novel is available. It's still available in the bookshops. And so you should also examine what I say about it. See, it's about a thing, it's about occurrences in 1947 and 1948 in Hyderabad state. You know, Hyderabad had a very special situation when India became independent. Hyderabad had a ruler of its own. And the Nizam wanted to be independent. He wanted to be a Mughal himself. And, but it was his community was minority. And see, there were no novelists at that time in Hyderabad. Naturally, there were confrontations between the minority government and the majority people. And in September 1948, the Indian troops marched into Hyderabad, and now you have this Telangana problem. See, the Telangana problem began in 1948. And my novel is about this 1946, 47, 48. It's about the days when people lived in real terror. You say one particular community, since it was the ruling community there, and anybody could come and again snatch your fountain pen and go away. And we used to play in a ground, cricket ground. It's not a cricket ground, it's just an open space where, and they would come with their hockey sticks and begin playing hockey. They may not know hockey, but they just want to take away that space from us. You see, this oppression a number of forms, in number of ways, this majority community was put to great harassment, and again, a kind of terror began to prevail. And again, when there is terror, quite this people going away, and again, all it's very, very much like partition days and Punjab, but not that scale. And I happened to be present during all those years. So I wrote this novel. And again, it's how good it is, you will have to examine and again tell me, or tell yourself. But that's the basis of that particular novel. I can't say that it is out of the world. It's a novel about a particular period. Thank you.
Now I think I should turn to the other two panelists. Sri Ashoka Mitran has mainly, of course, been speaking about the relationship between historical reality and fiction, as for example, as reflected in the 18th parallel, which is whose story is woven around Hyderabad during the Telangana struggle, the picture of a terror-struck people, and the kind of suffering that people of various classes and kinds underwent during that time. Well, this also brings us, in some sense, to the whole question of the reality between the relationship between history and fiction. In fact, if you look at the early works of Indian fiction, in most of the languages, they were examples of historical fiction. Right from, if you look at Begum Chandra or Harinarayan Apte in Marathi or C.V. Raman Pillai in Malayalam, or some of the early novels in Hindi, we find that they had a lot to do with the historical reality, and there is a whole genre called historical fiction. And it has taken new forms after independence. We have also, in English, a lot of writers. I think that change began with Salman Rushdie's Midnight Children, following which we have had Amitav Ghosh, for example, looking into the whole question of migration and slavery through his novels like Glass Palace and Sea of Poppies. So history has come to take almost center stage in contemporary fiction. I would like to ask Sri Govind Mishra, how does he look at this kind of a connection between history and reality, and how does he, as a novelist, look at reality and construct reality?
Thank you, Satchidanandan. Well, I sometimes wonder some questions, though they have been raised ages before, and so many answers have been given all along, yet they continue to chase us. People and in fiction. It's just like, why do we live? This is also a question which has been coming since ages, and so many answers have been provided. Similarly, a question associated with literature: what is the relevance of literature, particularly in these times? This also continues to sort of haunt us. But though so many answers have been given, we go on answering these questions to ourselves. Every writer has to find for himself or herself the answer to this question: why does he write? And he tries to find out the answers through his works, not through reasoning or debates or symposium and seminars. Similarly, about life, each one of you present here must be facing the question: why do I live? What for I live? And whatever answer you find in relation to your life, that is important. Not what the answer is given by Govind Mishra or Sri Ravi Shankarji. You have to find it out for yourself. So that is first thing. The second is the associating people with novel as a form. This question of people, association with people, is not always raised in relation to poetry, because there the concentration is on feeling. Here, whenever you talk of novels or fiction, associations start that there would be people, and there would also be structure of society around those people, and things of that sort. But my feeling is this question, I won't say irrelevant, but it answers itself. If I say, I am the people, I represent the people. Actually, in Urdu poetry, which is associated with highly individualized and momentary feelings, all shades are based on momentary feelings, even those poets. I am reminded of Firak Gorakhpuri's Darya chehron ke umde aate hain firak, aine dil mein surtein sajti. Now this aine dil, this is writer. इसमें सूरतें सजती हैं, माने people, they always are here. So, in Hindi also, when they start, looking down upon individualized characters portrayed in fiction, for example, our very good writer Nirmal Verma, his novels, because he portrayed the very solitary corners of life, they were looked down upon, because people thought, particularly a particular group always thought that the reality which is on the streets or in any walk of life, that should be reflected in plenitude. And whenever you concentrate on these individuals and their highly intensified feelings, then you are sort of digressing from the form of novel. I never agreed with that. Because here also, the question is of individuals, and individuals are also people. So even if you imagine, or take for example, a novel like George Orwell's Animal Farm. No people, only animals, but through them, the writer is talking about the people. So you just can't escape people. Now here the question arises whether you just portray the reality as it is, which is called photographic realism, or as a writer you are required to do something better than the generalist, because this photographic realism or whatever is happening, just portraying it as it is. This you read in newspapers every day, and there are articles on it. So whatever is happening around and what is happening in the with the people of your country or community, that is available to you, and probably in a better and more detailed form than in fiction. I personally feel, not only with me, with all fiction writers, the reality which is there around you and which you can't escape, that has to be transcended also. Every writer tries to transcend it. And in transcending, you come little beyond the people. You come to human beings, their distress, their tragedy, even individuals. So ultimately, the people get transformed into human beings. Whether it is historical novel, you might be writing about Rani Lakshmi Bai, as Vrindavan Lal Verma did. But there, the concern of the fiction writer will not be so much to narrate this history, but the plight, the individual struggle, the inner struggle of Lakshmi Bai as a human being. That becomes the subject. And since writer is, a writer, by writer I mean someone who is committed to writing, not for writing for the sake of sale or projecting someone or on some assignment. No. Committed writer always has human beings, the distress of human beings, their tragedies, their misfortunes, the way they struggle, that is always before them. And they transform it in the sense that the whole fiction or the whole creative piece gives you strength to struggle in your life. Whether you are able to associate yourself with the context of that fiction or not. The ultimate aim, and that probably some of the writers like me try to do it in a very funny way. I try to get the strength in my in the struggle of my life. So whenever we pose questions in our fiction through those people around us, as I said, you can't escape the people. People will be there. But maybe through those people, I am trying to find answer and even discover strength in my particular struggle of life. And that's in the transcending, beauty is created out of realism. Beauty which is always an eternal concern of a writer. How it is created out of realism, the best example will be probably those writers who have suffered a lot in their lives. Dostoevsky once said, beauty will save the world. And almost 100 years after, Solzhenitsyn, when he was delivering the Nobel Prize Nobel Prize award-winning lecture, he has quoted this line of Dostoevsky almost 100 years later. And of course, referring to Dostoevsky as he was a great visionary. Now, those of you who are a little familiar with Russian literature would be knowing Dostoevsky was given by the Tsars a decree to be shot dead. And he was almost made to stand, and the people were up there to shoot him. And just at the 11th hour, some pardon came from the Tsar side, and he escaped death. Now this writer saying, beauty will save the world. Think of Solzhenitsyn. He suffered at the hands of communists, the tyranny of the communists. Gulag Archipelago is a novel, so-called novel, but I consider it not so much a piece of art as full of people. He has almost interviewed the prisoners who were there along with him in Siberia in order to make it more authentic and to sort of give a blow to the communist regime of those days. But even with so many people coming and going in Gulag Archipelago, that to me is not as good a piece of art as his cancer ward is, where this human life, human destiny is touched. Gulag Archipelago you will have to associate it with a certain period of time, with a certain regime. But cancer ward is for all times. So what I said was transcending. The writer, and that is the effort of a fiction writer, how do you transcend this reality first from the people around you to the human destiny, and then out of human destiny reaching a point which can be called beauty. Now beauty has not to be associated only with beauty of a woman or beauty of nature. Beauty lies in one of my stories, Pagla Baba, the Paggal of Varanasi. He leaves Vishwanath temple and takes up the dome work of performing the last rites for those corpses which are lying here and there. You know, in Banaras, people go to die there in order to secure a place in heaven. So, lot of people, lot of corpses, they lie here and there on the streets. This Paggal, which ironically was Paggal, but he was a very wise person, he came to Varanasi to worship, to have the blessings of Lord Vishwanath, but he threw it away and started, performing wherever he would see any corpse lying unclaimed or unattended, he would put it on his trolley and sort of take it to the Shashwamedh Ghat and perform the rites. This is beauty. Another story of mine, Michael Lobo, an alcoholic. Now and at the end, I wrote this story on one advocate, John Lobo in Nagpur. I associated with him. He was an alcoholic out and out. Now, he could not leave alcohol even after father of a church repeatedly asked him to do. But one day, his daughter, his wife also has given him up. He used to scold the friends who will bring him drunk at the dead of night. Why have you brought him here? His place is on the streets. Let him lie there. So then after wife has almost given him up, his daughter, a small daughter of 8-9 years, she started picking him up from the staircase of the home. And one day she says, Papa, मैं आपको कब तक उठाती रहूंगी? Now that gave a spark and sort of threw a light inside him, and the whole world changed with that sentence. This is real life as portrayed by me. He went to the father next day and says, I am leaving alcohol right now, from today onwards. And alcoholics, it's very difficult for them to give up drinking. You know, ants start itching you all over your body. But he continued, and then later on, where the beauty comes, later on he would assemble alcoholics. There also he would give a lecture and say, how much can you drink? You can't drink as much as I have done in my life. I slept 7 years my life out. For 7 years I was just sleeping. So that way he picks up that job. One day a lady comes from the village and she sort of opens her back and starts narrating, my husband comes drunk, starts beating me here and there and all that. This fellow gets angry, Michael Lobo, and sort of abuses her. So, what can I do? I am a lawyer, you fight for divorce and all that. And then that lady just gets sort of disappointed or what, she just walks away without saying anything. Now, this fellow, Michael, thinks that lady it was not a lady, it was Jesus who had come in the guise of that lady. Now again, ultimately that story of mine, I picked up a prayer from the Bible which talks about search of God, but it relates to the search of that lady in the story. In other words, serving God or or seeking His mercy is nothing as compared to serving human beings. And this fellow thinks that till I have improved upon the plight of that lady, I will not give up, reforming people. He's always anxious about that. Now that is, trying to put a stop to human suffering caused by alcoholic in your family. That job he takes. This is beauty. I think I have taken so much of time.
Thank you, but I would like to just ask you a brief question. Well, you spoke about novels about communities and novels about individuals. Do you think that there has been a transformation in Hindi fiction and maybe generally in Indian fiction? For example, during the time of Premchand or Bhaneshwarnath Renu, they were mainly narrating, in some sense, societies and communities. At least since Agay's Shekhar Ek Jeevani and the later works of Nirmal Verma and all that, do you think there has been a change in the way novelists look at reality? Can you very briefly comment on that? What we call modernism, did it bring about a change in the attitude to reality?
You see, one thing is there what you call reality, it is not simple these days, as simple as it used to be in Premchand's days. It has grown more complex. And correspondingly, Indian fiction, not only Hindi fiction, Indian fiction as such, it has also developed largely because of exposure to the West. Because novel, though it existed in India in the form of Mahabharata also. Mahabharata, except for the fact that it is in verse, it is a novel, it is a big novel, where so many characters come and the dignity of each character is maintained. So, this exposure as well as the nature of reality, changes have come about in both. The reality has changed and the way the writers approach it, that has also changed. So, if you read Premchand's novels now, they would look to be very simplistic. Whereas in our times, this, because Premchand was concerned more with types, this is getting the focus now in novels. Now, about myself, then I will pass it on to Satchidanandan ji. I have noticed a strange thing. I have been both a realist and a romanticist. I have not tried. First novel which brought me fame was Lal Pili Zameen, which was about violence in Indian society, particularly in a village or a town bordering a village. So many characters, and all of them were real characters, which as a child I had seen. I thought I cannot do any other writing unless I get these people out of my system. And their names were also such that I could not even think of giving them any other name. Jhallu Pandit, Khandiya Mohalla. You can't give another name. So when it was published, and in those days Dharmyog was a very popular magazine, and that novel was serialized. It went to almost every village, and I got threatening letters from that community that you have bloody well defamed me. But I had to write that. Now, after that, I wrote about an Indian woman who has got everything, beauty, coming from a good family, a class 1 post, and yet she was suffering, there's something missing in her life. Now that novel is largely an individual-based novel, though as I said earlier, you can't avoid people. After all, individual suffering is also caused by the people around. So that novel was trying to find out, a lady trying to find out meaning in her life, lady who has everything. Now thereafter again, since I was a bureaucrat, I was surrounded by the bureaucratic reality. Again I became a realist. These things happen, with all writers. So ultimately I always say that you allow yourself as a writer. The other day a lady asked why I get blocked here to Shri Shriji's session. I was going to tell her that you have to follow your own path. It is not in our hands whether we become a romantic or a realist only. It depends on your sensitivity, the way the sensitivity develops. So in my case, it was always fluctuating from the inner world, depicting inner world, then going over to a larger chunk of the outward society. Now, my 10th novel was Dhool Paudhon Par, which concerned a lady who had nothing as compared to that lady who had everything. And how she shapes her life, where the ultimate aim is to acquire the capacity to take decisions about your life. Our Indian women were a helpless lot. They could not, they were never given the right to decide about themselves. So they lacked that capacity of decision making. Now here in Dhool Paudhon Par, a lady who was born out of a love marriage, Gandharv Vivah in our day, good old days. Her father fell in love with a Banjar in a nomadic side, and he had from her 2 children, one this lady and another brother. Though he had a family of his own. This Banjarin had an untimely death, so he brought both these siblings to his original house where there was a stepbrother and stepbrothers and a stepmother. Now her real brother, she also died. Yes, I think you have to read the novel for that. So ultimately, she acquires the capacity, of course with the help of a benefactor, to take decisions about her life. Now this is another reality, aspect of reality, which we depict these days. How the women acquire the capacity to take decisions about their life.
Thank you. So we have raised quite a few ideas during this discussion. One, that novel has become more complex because it wants to respond to a more complex reality than was available to, say, someone like Premchand. Second, that inner life is playing a major role compared to the earlier novels where outer life or social life was more important. And third, that there are sections of society which are emerging into light and into articulation, as he, for example, spoke of women. And so gender and similar other categories are also becoming organizing categories for narratives in our time. And obviously, because of all this, there has also been a change in style, a change in form, a change in structure. Now, I would like Nabaneeta Devsen to make a brief comment, maybe because he has already initiated the theme of women's fiction. So as a woman, do you find a woman's reality is very different from a man's reality? And how does your novels and also the novels by maybe other women writers differ from the novels written by men in terms of language, in terms of narration, in terms of the kind of reality that they relate to. And after that, we'll take some questions. We don't have much time left, actually, but yeah.
Some questions should be there.
Thank you very much. I'm extremely impressed by what we've been hearing, and I'm thankful for this beautiful talk that Shri Govind Mishra gave us. We are very short of time, so I think I'll just say a few things. I mean, there's no point in repeating things that have been already said. I have been writing novels, short stories, because when you talk of fiction, it's just not novels only. We have heard about the various realities of India. And we've also heard that the realities of women are quite often not the same as the realities of men. It goes without saying that when you're writing as a woman, you're looking at the world as a woman. But there is such a thing as negative capability. And that is how Govindaji has written from a woman's point of view. He's placed himself, he's imagined himself in a woman's place, and he's written from a woman's point of view. And I'm sure that is what a writer is supposed to do. You don't only talk from your own point of view, you try to place yourself in others' positions as well. As far as, well, actually my first book, first novel was called Ami Anupam. And it is a man's name, me, Anupam. And it is about a man. So there, it is about the feelings and experience and decision makings and flaws, and it is about a man, a very important person in society, an extremely respected journalist and political commentator, etc. The story, the novel was, it came out during the emergency, and it was the first novel that came out in Bangla about the Naxal movement. And it was about the Naxal movement. It was about how our social, the people from our position, academics, writers, thinkers, betrayed the next generation. How we had led them on by giving them all kinds of theories. And they had become Nakshals, and we were the mentors. And then they stake their lives, they kill and they die, they go into the jail. And what do? We run away. Either we go from Calcutta to Delhi or to America or England or somewhere and try to keep out. And we write. And we detach ourselves intellectually. Or rather, we attach ourselves intellectually, detach ourselves emotionally, and make it a part of our intellectual experience, not our lived experience. I was trying to write, I was very angry. I was a teacher at that time, and my students were suffering, and I could see this. And you just can't show how a man, woman, a person, a human being, has cheated himself and cheated others. And you have to make that person realize that what was happening was wrong. And this Ami Anupam is about that, about the realization, late realization. And it is, of course, from a man's point of view. A man who's intellectual and other kinds of, who lived the life that I lived. he was a man, I was a woman, but I could have been him. He was. It's not that I was not a part of him. I was a part of that social strata. I was among them, among the betrayers. Anyway, but later on I started thinking differently, and I'm afraid I better shut up because beautiful ladies are coming in with not so beautiful news, which is about time. And anyway, we've had such a lovely speech by him and wonderful things from Ashoka, Mitran. I don't have to go on and on. All I can say that I have been writing about women after that from various aspects, how I look at life. I don't think there's something that you want to hear from me which you haven't heard from him. Honestly, because it is the same way that a writer thinks and feels, whether you're a man or a woman. If you're a sincere person, doing your thing from your heart, wanting to write because you have no other choice, that is the basic position where you can see yourself best. Then you have to be honest. And you have to also remember that we make mistakes. A writer can make mistakes and can go astray and can write for money and can write for name and fame. It's sort of things. It's a very common saying. One thing that I remembered not to do, these things, that do not write for fame, do not write for money. Write what your heart wants you to write. Whether it sells or not doesn't matter. It will reach the reader that wants you. I don't believe in, today we heard from various writers that they write for themselves. I don't think we write for ourselves. Maybe we write for ourselves, but if we only wrote for ourselves, we would keep it in the drawer, we would not publish it. Because we want to communicate, as Ashoka Mitran said, we want to communicate. We want to get in touch. We want others to know what we are thinking. That is why we publish our stuff. And we also know, we have some idea as to who's going to read it. And it is not as if you have no idea at all who's going to read it, because you do know who are the literate people and who are the people who are interested in literature, roughly. You know that you don't reach out where you would like to reach out, and one day you would. You expect that. So we all are trying our best to reach out to people, as you said, that we write about human beings, about human experience. And I think it's the same thing that the films are doing. You can't say that I make films for myself. No. We make films because we want to communicate. And anyway, it's too late. Thank you for asking me to speak. He wants questions and answers. I don't think we have the time. You know here. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We would have loved to hear more from you. I'm really sorry that we're running out of time. I have been told maybe we could take not more than maybe one question, or if they allow two. But if there is an urgent question, kindly come up with the question, but be very brief and pointed in the way you put it. Is there a question to either of these writers?
Good afternoon. I have a question for Mr. Govind Mishra. You spoke about the human struggle being central to Indian reality and the novel. But Indian reality is not just human reality. We know that our environment is suffering, changing, and that's also our reality. So what do you have to say about representing non-human Indian realities in the novel?
Well, as I could not make myself very clear, the reality has to be portrayed. You can't, as I told you, a romantic, so-called romantic novelist also can't escape reality. Even Nirmal Verma's writings portray reality. Now, how out of that reality, the question of transcending that reality arises. So, these things you are talking about the first phase of the portrayal. And in the second phase, where the writer embarks upon that eternal thing, interpretation of life, interpretation of reality, contemporary reality, that's where this transcending comes. I could not talk much about Dhool Paudon Par, but I may inform you that it has been translated in Kannada, and a book is available with Nivedita here. You can get the name of the publisher and the translator, so you can, where Satchidanandan had cut me short, you can see how the reality has been portrayed and how it has been translated.
Thank you. I have no choice. Thank you very much, and I think we have had a very extremely meaningful discussion on the various aspects of novel. Thank you, and thank you.